Good evening and welcome to the football field at the Leo F. Ryan Athletic Complex. At this time, we have a special presentation to make and ask that you direct your attention to the north end of the field. On December 7th, 1941, our great nation was attacked at Pearl Harbor. Thousands of Americans were killed that day, a day that will live in infamy. 2 short weeks following that fateful day, our next guest went to the local recruiting office and joined the United States Navy. He lied about his age and skipped his senior year at Derby High School to serve his nation, leaving behind his mom, dad, and 10 siblings on 8th Street. Following basic training, he headed to the Pacific and served on the Suwannee, a converted aircraft carrier which supported air missions in the Pacific, and was engaged in several major battles with the Japanese fleet. In October 1944, the Suwannee was deployed as part of a large force supporting the U.S. invasion of the Philippines. The Suwannee was attacked by the first wave of kamikaze suicide strikes launched by the Japanese during the war. Our honored guest was blown off the deck from the spot as a rear gunner. Half his crew was lost in that battle, but he survived. Our guest was one of 3 brothers to serve during World War II, and one of his brothers, John, took part in the storming of Normandy Beach in 1944, where he lost his life as a result. John is buried with his comrades in the Normandy American Cemetery. After the war, our guest returned to Derby, where he began working, having a successful career, and attending Derby football games on a regular basis. This past Monday evening, recognizing that our guest never graduated with his classmates at Derby High School, but instead serving our country in war, the Board of Education voted to grant him an official diploma in accordance with State Statute 10-221A. We draw your attention to the field as Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Matthew Conway, Principal of Derby High School, Mr. Martin Pascal, and Chairman of the Board of Education, Mr. Jim Gilday, present our guest with his official diploma and make him an official member of the class of 1942.
No one told me anything. Oh my God, is he crying? He's just blowing his nose. I love him. I want him to come home with me.
Over the past several years, I've had the privilege and honor of awarding many of our Derby students their high school diploma. Nothing gives me greater honor than what I am about to do now. Silvio Foggy Nero, by the virtue of the authority vested in me by the Derby Board of Education, I hereby confer upon you the respective high school diploma for which you have been recommended, with all the rights, privileges, obligations, and responsibilities appertaining thereunto, and in witness whereof we award you this diploma.
Ladies and gentlemen, please rise and give a warm hometown welcome to Derby High School graduate, Mr. Silvio Faginero. I'd like to recognize some of the current Derby High School athletic teams. Boys soccer, and these folks are on the field, so please raise your hands when I announce you. Boys soccer, head coaches Eric O'Toole and assistant Tony Gonzalez. Girls soccer, head coach Francisco Salazar, assistant James Piazza. Track and field, head coach Nick Belugo, assistant Lucia Hannick. Baseball, head coach Stephen Bader, assistant coach Adam Baker. Girls softball, head coach Joe DiMartino. And your head coach for football is George French, and your head cheerleading coach is Rebecca Bell. If I could direct your attention to center field, where we're going to do the coin toss. But before we do that, we have two special guests to take part in the official coin toss this evening. One, a member of the class of 1942, and one, a member of the class of 1946. First, we have the oldest living Derby cheerleader and a member of the class of 1946. Our first guest, Mrs. Catherine Kelleher, was born in 1928 to Lillian McGar Cable and Ivan Cable. She lived in Derby all of her life and attended St. Mary's Grammar School and then Derby High School. Her dad was the chief of police in Derby. Her husband, Jack, and Ivan physically built the house on Derby's North Ave in which Catherine resides today. Catherine never moved more than a few blocks away from her original homesteads. She met the love of her life, Jack Kelleher, as students in grammar school and then started to date him in high school. Jack was the president of his senior class, the quarterback and kicker for the football team, and a pitcher and outfielder for the baseball team. During their senior year, Jack was scouted, and after his graduation in 1946, he was invited to try out as a pitcher for a major league club. Our guest was the captain of her cheerleading squad. In their senior year, Jack injured his leg during a game, but the coach told his teammates to carry him onto the field to kick the extra point. Jack rose to the occasion and made the kick, and they won the game. That night, after the game, he walked to Catherine's house. Then they walked down to Hyde's drugstore on Anson Street to get a chocolate malt. Then he walked her home. The next day, he went to the hospital and found out that his leg was broken. Catherine and Jack were married in 1950. Catherine and Jack had 3 children, Michael, Sharon, and Christopher. She also has 5 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren. Catherine's younger sister, Joan Williamson, worked at Derby City Hall as the city clerk for many years, and the Aldermanic Chambers has been dedicated in her memory. Catherine and Jack volunteered their time at St. Mary's Church as lifetime members. Catherine served on the parish council, is a member of the Ladies Guild, and for many years helped out at the parish festival. She also was a Cub Scout leader and a member of the DHS Band Parents Association. Catherine is still very active with her family and numerous friends as she splits her time between her homes in Florida and Derby, but her heart is always in Derby. Let us give a warm welcome to a member of the class of 1946, Mrs. Catherine Kelleher, captain of the Derby cheerleading squad. Our second guest, and now a member of the class of 1942, Mr. Silvio Foggy Nero. Foggy Nero was born to Louise and Mitchell Nero, Michael Nero, in 1923, the second to last child in a family of 10 children. His formative years coincided with the Great Depression, so the family had very little, although Foggy always recalled happy memories of his family life more than any hardships. They lived in a 3-room house, although some of the older children had moved out by the time Foggy was a young boy. Foggy was a star baseball player and also excelled at track, football, and basketball. Recalling his baseball career, Foggy nonchalantly speaks of having pitched every inning of every game while he was at Derby High School. When he was just 17 and still in high school, Pearl Harbor was bombed. 2 weeks later, Foggy went to the nearest recruiting office, lied about his age, and signed up for the Navy, leaving before the start of his senior year and never graduating until today. After the war, Foggy returned to Derby and started working. He joined the Lafayette semi-pro baseball team and had great times traveling and playing. As the 1950s loomed, he met the only woman he ever loved, Grace Marquise. They married in 1952. Together, they raised 3 children, Carl, Joyce, and Lisa, in their Derby home, where Foggy and Grace lived for over 40 years. In the late 60s, Foggy opened his own successful business, in which his son later joined him. Grace and Foggy worked very hard throughout their lives, sent all 3 their children to college, and were able to see their children married, enjoy their grandchildren, and do some traveling once they were empty nesters. Sadly, Grace died at the age of 69, and Foggy had to go on without her. Let's give a warm welcome to the newest member of the class of 1942, Mr. Foggy Nero.
You are the visiting team. Mr. Silvio will be flipping the coin. You call it in the air, please.
Tails.
Tails is called, and it's a head. Derby, it's your choice. Derby wins the toss, except to receive. What goal are you going to defend? Would you put up to your goal, please? Derby, right at the 50.
Come on, boy!